The crystalline spires of Centauri Prime Academy pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 suns into countless rainbow fractals. Zara Williams stood at the base of the main tower, her dark hands pressed against its cool surface, feeling the subtle vibrations of quantum energy coursing through the structure. After 2 years of study at humanity's top institutions, she'd finally earned her place here, the most prestigious scientific academy in the known galaxy. But today wasn't about admiring architecture. Today was about the quantum paradigm trial. Candidate Williams, a melodious voice chimed from behind her. Your presence is requested in the Chamber of Trials. Zara turned to face Administrator Engstall, whose translucent body seemed to shimmer with internal starlight. The Etherian's expression was unreadable, but their tone carried the familiar note of skepticism that Zara had grown accustomed to hearing from non-human faculty members. Thank you, Administrator, Zara replied, straightening her academy uniform. I trust the chamber has been prepared according to standard protocols. Standard protocols? Engstall's voice wavered slightly, are hardly relevant for what you propose to attempt. No being has passed the quantum paradigm trial in over a millennium. The last who tried. They paused, their crystalline form clouding briefly. Well, they are still trying to repair that section of the quantum matrix. Zara allowed herself a small smile. There's a first time for everything, Administrator. The walk to the chamber felt longer than usual, their footsteps echoing through corridors that seemed to bend reality itself. Senior faculty members from a dozen different species lined the walls, their varied anatomies united in expressions of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed disdain. The Chamber of Trials itself was a marvel of engineering, a perfect sphere suspended in void space, its interior shifting between states of matter like a dream struggling to maintain coherence. At its center floated the quantum core, a swirling mass of pure possibility that had defied understanding since the Academy's founding. Candidate Williams, Professor Rickan, the head of theoretical physics, addressed her from his hovering platform. His insectoid features clicked in agitation. You understand that this trial was designed to be impossible. It exists to teach humility, to demonstrate that there are fundamental limits to what consciousness can achieve. Zara approached the initialization platform, her boots clicking against the transparent surface. With respect, Professor, impossible is a human specialty. We have a rather poor track record of accepting limitations. A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled faculty. In the observation dome above, students from every corner of the galaxy pressed against the quantum glass, eager to witness another attempt at the legendary trial. Zara caught snippets of their conversations through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. Human arrogance. Barely evolved past their planetary confines. Fascinating approach to quantum mechanics, though. The quantum core pulsed, sending waves of probability cascading through the chamber. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the patterns wash over her consciousness. Where others saw chaos, she perceived rhythm. Where they found noise, she heard music. Begin trial initialization, Administrator Engstall announced, their voice resonating with official gravity. Candidate Williams, state your understanding of the parameters. Zara opened her eyes, focusing on the swirling heart of the core. The quantum paradigm trial requires the candidate to solve an impossible equation, to reconcile opposing states of reality without causing a collapse of the quantum framework. All previous attempts have approached it as a mathematical problem. That's why they failed. And you believe you have found another way. Professor Rickan's mandibles twitched with interest. I believe the trial itself is alive, Zara stated clearly, causing several faculty members to shift uncomfortably. It's not a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation to be had. And humans, she stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the core. We're very good at surprising conversations. The core responded to her proximity, its swirling patterns accelerating. Colors that had no names in any human language blazed through the chamber. The trial was beginning, and with it, perhaps the next chapter in human-galactic relations. Let's talk, Zara whispered to the core and stepped into the impossible. The chamber erupted in chaos as reality itself seemed to bend around her. The trial had begun, and no one, not even Zara, could predict what would happen next. But as the quantum fields began to dance around her, one thing was certain. The galaxy was about to learn that human imagination knew no bounds. The moment Zara entered the quantum core, conventional physics ceased to matter. Colors inverted, gravity became a suggestion, and probability waves manifested as visible ripples in the fabric of space-time. Most candidates lasted seconds in this environment. Zara began to dance. "Extraordinary," Professor Rakan whispered, his compound eyes reflecting the impossible movements before him. "She's not fighting the quantum fluctuations, she's synchronizing with them." Within the core, Zara moved like a conductor leading an orchestra of reality itself. Each wave of probability that should have torn her consciousness apart instead became part of her movement. The impossible equation that had defeated countless geniuses manifested around her as a three-dimensional fractal, its variables shifting like living things. "Your approach is unexpected," a voice resonated through her mind. The core itself was speaking, its thoughts translating into waves of quantum possibility. "Others seek to impose order. You seek harmony." Zara smiled, her body flowing through states of quantum superposition. "Order and chaos are human constructs. Reality doesn't care about our categories." The first challenge materialized. A quantum knot, a paradox made manifest. Previous candidates had attempted to untangle it through pure logic. Zara saw something different. The knot wasn't a puzzle, but a dance partner. She moved through its dimensional folds, her consciousness expanding to perceive all possible states simultaneously. In the observation dome, the assembled faculty watched in stunned silence as the human candidate achieved what thousands had deemed impossible. The quantum knot didn't untangle. It transformed, becoming part of a larger pattern that somehow made more sense than its original state. "Impossible," Administrator Anxithal whispered, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. "She's rewriting the fundamental parameters of the trial." But not everyone was impressed. Senior theorist Valim, a being of pure energy contained within a containment field, pulsed with concern. "This is dangerous. The trial exists to teach limits. If she succeeds." "If she succeeds," came a new voice, deep and resonant. "Then perhaps it is time for those limits to be questioned." High Administrator Cthor emerged from the shadows of the observation deck, his ancient form barely visible in the conventional spectrum. As the oldest living member of the Academy's council, his presence at a trial was unprecedented. Inside the core, Zara faced the second phase. The quantum equation evolved, its variables multiplying exponentially. Traditional mathematics would have collapsed under the computational load. But Zara wasn't calculating. She was feeling, intuiting, letting her human consciousness expand into spaces it was never meant to go. "Your species is young," the core communicated, "barely a cosmic breath since you first looked to the stars. Yet you see patterns we thought impossible to perceive." Zara's response came not in words but in movement, her consciousness weaving through quantum states like a needle through fabric. "Youth has advantages. We haven't learned what we can't do yet." The equation twisted, trying to trap her in paradox loops that had broken the minds of previous candidates. But human minds were different, evolved to see faces in clouds, to find patterns in chaos, to imagine what had never been. Where logic failed, intuition soared. "She's approaching the threshold," Professor Rakan announced, his voice tight with tension. "The point where all previous attempts." The core pulsed with energy, its quantum fields condensing into a singular point of infinite possibility. This was the moment that had shattered the sanity of the last candidate who'd made it this far. But Zara didn't try to solve the paradox. She embraced it. "Fascinating," Cthor murmured. "She's not trying to conquer the impossible. She's becoming part of it." In that moment, something fundamental shifted in the chamber of trials. The boundary between observer and observed, between the possible and impossible, blurred. Zara's consciousness expanded beyond normal human limits, touching something vast and ancient and alive. The core resonated with a frequency never before recorded. You understand, then, why this trial exists. It's not about passing or failing, Zara replied, her voice echoing through quantum space. It's about evolution, about breaking through the barriers we put around our own minds. The equation reached its final form, a representation of ultimate reality that no consciousness was meant to comprehend. But Zara had stopped trying to comprehend. Instead, she let it flow through her, becoming a conduit for something greater than understanding. In the observation dome, instruments began to overload. Reality itself seemed to blur at the edges as human consciousness touched something far beyond its designed limits. The assembled faculty watched in awe as the impossible began to bend to the will of a species that had only recently learned to leave their planetary cradle. The second phase was ending, but this was just the beginning. Zara Williams wasn't just taking a test, she was redefining what was possible. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. The quantum core's light had changed, shifting from its usual ethereal blue to a deep, resonant purple that pulsed like a heartbeat. Zara floated in its center, her consciousness expanded beyond normal human limits as she began to perceive something the greatest minds in the galaxy had missed for millennia. The core isn't just a machine. She broadcast to the observation deck, her voice carrying through quantum channels. It's alive. It evolves. Every failed attempt has been teaching it about different species' approaches to reality. High Administrator Thor moved closer to the quantum glass, his ancient form rippling with interest. Then all this time, we've been learning and being learned, Zara completed the thought. But no species before tried to simply communicate. The core responded by manifesting a new challenge. Not an equation this time, but a series of quantum memories. Zara saw the history of the trial itself, thousands of brilliant minds approaching the impossible with logic, force, or desperation. Each failure had added to the core's understanding, making it more complex, more alive. But as Zara delved deeper into this quantum consciousness, something went wrong. The core's defensive systems, triggered by this unprecedented level of interaction, activated. Reality began to fracture around her. Candidate Williams, Professor Ricon's voice cut through the chaos. You must withdraw. The quantum backlash could destroy your consciousness. Zara felt her mind being pulled in 1,000 directions at once, each quantum state trying to claim her consciousness. The pain was extraordinary, but she refused to let go. No, she gritted through clenched teeth. This is part of the test. It has to trust us as much as we trust it. The core's defenses intensified, threatening to tear her apart at the quantum level. But where others would have retreated, Zara pushed deeper. She opened her mind fully to the core, sharing not just thoughts, but the entire human experience. Triumph, failure, love, loss, the inexhaustible drive to explore and understand. Then something unprecedented happened. The core stopped attacking. In the silence that followed, a new kind of communication emerged. The core wasn't just accepting Zara's presence, it was resonating with it. The quantum fields began to harmonize with her consciousness, creating patterns of impossible beauty. How is she doing this? Administrator Anxethal demanded, their crystalline form flickering with agitation. Thor's ancient voice carried a note of wonder. She isn't doing anything. She's letting it happen. Humans have a remarkable capacity for accepting the impossible as merely improbable. The core began to share its secrets, not in equations or formulas, but in pure understanding. Zara saw the true purpose of the trial, not to prove impossibility, but to find a consciousness capable of true quantum cooperation. It was never about passing a test, Zara broadcast to the stunned audience. It was about finding a species ready for the next step in evolution. The chamber erupted in debate. Some faculty members called for the trial's immediate termination, fearing the implications of this revelation. Others watched in fascinated silence as human consciousness demonstrated capabilities that defied their understanding of reality. Zara began the final preparation, her mind sensing with the core's quantum rhythms. The impossible equation that had started this journey transformed into something new, not a barrier to be broken, but a bridge to be crossed. The final phase of the trial manifested as a choice. The core presented Zara with two possibilities: withdraw now with the knowledge she'd gained, or attempt something no being had ever survived: complete quantum integration. If you proceed, the core communicated, you risk everything. Your consciousness may be lost forever. Zara's response was characteristically human. Or we might discover something wonderful. She chose to proceed. The chamber of trials blazed with light as human consciousness merged with quantum reality. The impossible equation solved itself, not through force or logic, but through the simple act of transcending its own limitations. In that moment, Zara Williams became something more than human, yet paradoxically, more human than ever. Her consciousness expanded through the quantum fields, touching the very fabric of reality itself. The core's ancient knowledge flowed through her, even as her human perspective transformed its understanding. When the light faded, Zara stood on the platform, changed but whole. The equation that had defeated thousands floated around her in solved form, its solution both elegantly simple and impossibly complex. High Administrator Cthor was the first to speak. "The trial is complete," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of history. But more importantly, everything has changed. Zara nodded, still processing the vastness of what she'd experienced. "The core wasn't testing our ability to solve an impossible problem," she explained. "It was waiting for a species that could see beyond the very concept of impossibility." The implications were staggering. Humanity's unique perspective, their ability to imagine, to dream, to defy conventional limitations, had opened a door that would transform galactic civilization. The quantum paradigm trial had never been about passing or failing. It had been about evolution, about finding a species ready to take the next step. As the chamber slowly returned to normal, Administrator Xethel approached Zara. "What happens now?" Zara smiled, her eyes reflecting quantum possibilities that hadn't existed moments before. Now we start asking new impossible questions. After all," she added with a characteristic human grin, "that's what we do best." In the days that followed, the story of the human who broke the impossible spread across the galaxy. But breaking the trial was just the beginning. Humanity had proved itself ready for challenges beyond imagination, and the universe, it seemed, was finally ready to share its deeper mysteries with a species crazy enough to believe in the impossible. The quantum barriers that had limited galactic civilization for millennia began to fall, one by one, as human intuition combined with alien logic to forge a new understanding of reality itself. And at the heart of it all was the simple truth that had made it possible. Sometimes the only way to solve an impossible problem is to be too stubborn to believe in impossibility. Zara Williams had done more than pass a test. She had opened a door for her entire species, and beyond that door lay wonders that even humans hadn't dared to imagine.